So now it is time for questions from our audience and answers from our presenters. So I would like to invite the presenters to come up to the stage once again. We will be alternating between questions from those of you in the room and from our online participants. Patricia and Daniela from AMSA are in the audience with microphones. Okay, I see Daniela there. And they will have microphones. We'll be alternating with questions from those of you in the room and with our online participants. Katie from AMSA will be reading the online questions to us. And for those of you in the room, please, if you have a question, please raise your hand and then wait until either Daniela or Patricia brings you the microphone before asking your question so that our online viewers can hear the question as well. For our online participants, please email your questions to events@amsa.org or tweet using the hashtag AMSAevents. And since we do have a limited time for the Q&A session, please try to keep your questions concise and clear and keep them to one question at a time. If we are not able to get through all of the questions, we will compile the list of unanswered questions and we'll send them directly to the presenters to be answered following the event. Okay, who has the first question for us? Katie, have we got one online? Okay, we'll start with an online question.
Okay, so our first question actually came through Twitter, and it's from Rachel. And Rachel would like to know, for rural and remote service providers, can clients join the VAST group via Skype?
Hasn't happened yet, but I don't know.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think that, there's something that we could probably, I'm not going to say yes or no, but why don't you contact our office online? I think it's something we could possibly do either by phone might be better or by Skype. It's something that we could certainly talk about. So please go online at vast-vancouver.ca. It has our phone number there, and give us a call because it'd be great. We do have a provincial mandate through our funding through the province. So yeah, it would be great to be able to help you out. Absolutely.
Can I just make one very brief comment about that, what you mentioned, phone? SFU Ethics has determined, I'm not sure how, that Skype to Skype calls, not Skype to phone, but Skype to Skype are more secure in terms of confidentiality than Skype to phone or Skype or telephone calls. Just putting it out there.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, did I see a hand in the room? Any questions at all? Okay, so we've got one. Tricia?
So my question is for Mark. You mentioned in your presentation that there are some reasons behind not accessing services for newcomers, like fear of stigmatization or so many other reasons. So what is your suggestion for us who serve newcomers and we know that they might be suffering from mental illness? So what do you think we can do to encourage them to access services?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, it really, and I think the other panelists can also speak to this as well, but for me, it's kind of that active listening, because it may be that that particular client, it will not, let's start with this way of looking at it, may not access services. Because what happens often is if they're seeing you as a settlement worker, they trust you, right? And they feel like that there's some connection. And we know that with mental health, the relationship is really the key aspect and helping relationship, having that strong relationship. Now, I'm not suggesting that settlement workers are, fill in the role per se as a mental health, clinician, but providing that support to them and then letting them know about what the services are in the community. Now, what the main problem we have right now is there's so few specialized services for immigrants and refugees, right? I mean, we do have VAST. There is a clinic through VGH as well. But of course, the resources are limited. I think that really what we're talking about is community development. I talked about, some of the suggestions from some of the focus group members, working with churches, working within the communities to get to try to minimize the stigma, so people feel, that they're more able to reach out. On an individual basis, I think that developing that relationship and then providing the information the best you can. Now, it may not be that they'll access those services. Now, of course, as you know, if somebody has, is in crisis, then you have to do something about that. But if they're not, then you may be that kind of support, a different type of support than actually clinical support. But I'm wondering what others may have to say about this.
I could add something to that. Oh, no, go ahead. I would say that we, counselors, and we at VAST, encounter that struggle as well. How to introduce counseling to a client, how to explain it, how to normalize the fact that they are accessing it. One thing that you could do, because you were asking about how I can do that, right? How to talk about this with the client, how to invite them in. One thing you could do is what we do. We say, we basically encourage them, reassure them that coming to counseling doesn't imply that they have to tell the whole story the first day. That's crucial, and that's not always understood. So they most of the times take for granted that they have to open up and tell their whole story to someone new, and they already trust you. So reassuring them with that, you are telling me that you're struggling with sleep. Maybe you go see Mariana does, you go to see Camila does, and they can help you with that. And then the headaches, are you going to see a doctor, and they continue. How about exploring that? Or how about looking into that? Using very lay language, focusing on observables, the complaints that they're sharing with you. Maybe one, the sleep, those thoughts that keep coming, and you're trying to push them away, and they keep coming. Really simple language, and reassuring them that they won't have to tell the whole story. That's not a prerequisite to access counseling. The story will unfold, and we'll look into that after, once the relationship is established.
I'm from the table, go ahead.
Oh, so
No, you go.
So I guess speaking with Soma Ganesen once, he said, what people really need to be mentally healthy is, a home, a friend, and a job. And, and obviously it depends at your different stage of life, but, by a job it means sort of a purpose, right? And that's why I liked the determinants of mental health identified by the Vic Health Framework, because they essentially address those issues. And address people's need for, self-determination and so on, freedom from discrimination. I think, really, if you want to look at how you can help the largest number of your clients who don't suffer necessarily from, serious mental illness that requires specialized counseling services, but, depression, anxiety, those sorts of things that come with immigration for many of your clients, then you need to look at your services in terms of, what are we doing? Maybe to be more self-conscious of what are we doing to support those things, the social inclusion, the freedom from violence, the access to resources. You're doing an enormous amount. So that's part of it. Look at the slides, look at the examples of the things that people have stated. You have examples of your own, though, I'm sure, that you could add to that. But in addition to that, what you need to recognize is that what you are developing that is very unique is trust with your clients. And I'm not just sort of throwing this out as something abstract. We've looked at this in, through a number of different research projects, and trust keeps coming up. It's a very important resource that you develop with your clients. The biggest thing that gets in the way of that is funding that is short-sighted and hence short-term, because many of the people who were delivering programs that were showing extremely positive results with their clients by virtue of the fact that they had over time developed trust, and increasingly those clients were accessing internal counseling sources, for example, in their agencies, things like that, or they were coming to the person who ran the program and revealing things where they could refer them to other services like violence prevention, this kind of thing. Those people were saying, well, this is May. I don't know if I have a job or not in June, because this has to be reassessed every year. So funders out there, that's a really big problem.
I just need to add to that. I think those are all great points, and I think that one of the pieces with the settlement work, when we talked about the stages of trauma, stage 1 work, the safety and stabilization work, I actually think that settlement is doing a big piece of that. In terms of creating stability in terms of housing, employment. In terms of legal stability, whatever legal status, whatever it might be, that is really doing the stage 1 work and doing mental health work. So I think that one of the things inside the settlement world is looking at your work through a trauma-informed lens, which I know a lot of settlement workers already do that. Mm-hmm. But I think as an organization, I think that can really help in terms of looking at your work on a broader scope than that's, because I don't think settlement is just task-based. I think on a broader level, it's really about doing this stage 1 work. And I think that if the organization looks at it that way, then you can maybe create, do some more group work that has the ability not only to look at these tasks, but also to be able to create peer support and create community. And then once you start to do that, you start to see some of your own barriers within the organization, and you might partner with an organization like us or like with Mosaic, and you might go, okay, we can get to this point with our work, and now we need some specialized trauma counseling when we exceed our expertise on this level. But I think there's a lot of trauma-informed practice that can happen inside the settlement work, and that is really core stage 1 trauma work.
Thank you. Katie, have you got another online question for us?
Yeah, I've got lots. And actually, Dylan, thank you for setting the stage for me for this question. This is a question from Philippe from the Immigrant Welcome Center in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. And Philippe would like to comment that regarding VAST's presentation, at what stage of the trauma recovery process would you use the PET? And if at stage 2, what tool system would you suggest to incorporate for stage 1 of the trauma process?
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Yeah. The second part was, and if it's at stage 2, what tool or system would you suggest to incorporate for stage 1 of the trauma process?
Perfect. Stage 1, we cover throughout group and individual. It's ongoing. When it comes to stage 2, the trauma memory processing, we do that individually, for sure. And we implement modalities that really tap on the nature of trauma as physiological. And we use body-mind oriented modalities. Of course, we use trauma-informed CBT as well. We work with the foundation of emotional self-regulation that we develop through the participation at group, those skills that we build, that the client has learned to practice to create a sense of safety and grounding and centering, and building from that, having the client here and now in his body, we can work through the trauma memories. And we use narrative exposure therapy, we use trauma-based CBT to go through that stage 2 work of the trauma memory processing. And of course, in doing that, always the foundation of stabilization and containment that we built in the first stages of recovery, we gradually move on to the stage 3, the reconnection. And actually, we always laugh because we say we are doing stage 3 work, the reconnection and establishing relationships from day 1 at group. So that's what we meant when we said the stages are anything but linear, right? It's a constant recycling. I don't know if this answers your question wholly. Probably not, but I will pass it on to Dylan.
Well, and be mindful, of course, like that if you're doing, once you've created, done some of the stage 1 work, the safety and stabilization work, and you're moving into some of the processing of the trauma story, then at times you're obviously going to have to move back into stage 1 work because there's triggers within the processing of the story. So then you move back into stage 1, you move back into stage 2. So that's going to be an ongoing process. And so it depends, of course, on the client, the trauma itself, and the skill of the counselor. But like I say, if you're out there, you're certainly welcome to contact us too. We're more than happy to talk about that and provide any sort of advice that we can to people outside of Vancouver.
Thank you. Now, I saw a hand up in the room here. Right, okay, Daniela?
Hi there. I think I saw in the initial description of this event a reference to increased funding for this area for 2016 to 19. I'm just wondering, did I make that up, or can someone speak to that and whether we think that will have an impact on the service landscape at all?
I think you made it up. I think that was wishful thinking. I don't know. Does somebody know something about this?
Is that the CIC, the new funding piece? I know that there's, I know that the province of British Columbia, we get some funding for trauma service through the Ministry of Jobs, Tourism, Skills Training, and I know that there's going to be an RFP that's going to be released at some point soon. Although I think the recent sort of crisis has sort of put that on hold for a bit, so I'm not sure where that's at. But I haven't heard of any increased funding for mental health services. And as far as I know there's people from CIC in the room here. You might have a better answer, but I don't think I haven't heard that mental health services is going to be on the CIC plate in the next little bit.
There has been some funding out there, funding calls from Community Action Initiative from the province for mental health issues.
Okay. Have we got another online question?
I do. I have another Twitter question, and this comes from Jasmine, and she says, we noticed that a lack of childcare wasn't addressed as a barrier to mental health support. Can someone speak to this? Maybe Mark?
Well, childcare, I mean, it is a barrier to mental health support. That's obviously the case. And I think that always the issue is that, how can you fund that? I think we mentioned before, we were just talking about how mental health really isn't within the framework of CIC funding, right? They consider that to be a provincial responsibility. So when the programs at Mosaic, when we put together programs and our proposals to CIC, childcare and access to services is a big piece of what we do. We always have childcare for all of our English classes, but if we're not able to propose any kind of mental health or trauma services to CIC, then the source of funding that would support access with childcare is not available. Also, in provincial funding, maybe other people can speak better to this than I, but I don't know in terms of what childcare availability there is for clinical counseling or group work. So this is a major piece. Yeah, this is a good point.
If I can just speak to that as well briefly, it's something that comes up in the work that I do with immigrant seniors a lot, because it's by virtue of the fact that we don't have accessible childcare in the province and in the country, in fact, that immigrant seniors are brought here for the large part. This is why families need to bring older parents over to look after them. So, we have noticed in not only this project, but in other projects that I've done, that it is not possible for older women in particular, but some older men as well, to access valuable programs that promote social inclusion and hence mental well-being and the various other mental health determinants. It's not possible for them to participate in those programs unless childcare is provided, because they are the primary caregivers of the grandchildren. So this needs to be thought out across the board.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Hi, I'm asking a question from the perspective of the language classroom. I've been in situations whereby students might be traumatized, or in situations where potentially even other students in the class feel uncomfortable, say. In the past, there was through Fraser Health, there was a program dedicated to supporting mental health students who wanted to continue their language training but were unable to do so in a typical language classroom. I'm wondering, are there any informal options out there now? I know that the ACE program was canceled after the repatriation, and I'm not sure if there's other alternatives, but having been in that situation as an instructor myself, it was helpful to be able to guide some of my students in that direction.
I don't know, but I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, I don't know anything specific, because you mentioned, right, the ACE program, which really was the option, right, and that funding has been eliminated, correct? And so I don't know of a particular option right now in this area.
Yeah, I don't either, actually. I'm just trying to think of students who are generally here on temporary study permits and temporary work permits. I'm trying to think of outside the school context, which I know generally doesn't exist. What agency would support that?
I mean, obviously there are many English conversation circles that exist, right? All the different settlement agencies provide those informal type of practice in terms of your English with a little bit of instruction, but nothing specifically dedicated for somebody who might be struggling with a mental health problem. Not that I know of.
I think we've got time for about one more question. We'll take another online question, please, Katie.
Thank you. And this question comes from Beulah Ghosh, who is a ESL program coordinator in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. And so she starts with a comment and then a question. The comment is, a few years ago, Immigrant Women of Saskatchewan had conducted a qualitative research on PTSD and immigrant women with funding from Prairie Women Center of Health. The research indicated that immigrant women look for social interaction with other immigrant women to deal with their isolation and depression. This was a common thread from all the women interviewed. So the question is, does any research on PTSD indicate that formal social interaction among immigrant women themselves and other non-immigrant women can be very valuable and effective to deal with isolation and depression?
It's a very specific question, actually.
Very specific.
I would say there's likely to be, because it makes perfect sense to me, and I think kind of more broadly speaking, I would say that would be the case, but I can't speak to any particular piece of research.
Yeah, I mean, there is a fair bit of research now supporting, as I mentioned in my talk, the importance of social inclusion. And you're speaking specifically to the issue of PTSD, but then you're talking about depression as well. So the question's a little bit confusing, because I'm not sure if you're speaking more generally or more specifically. But certainly, if anybody's interested, I could give them, I could pull up from the database of resources I have on immigrants and mental health, a fair number of resources on the importance of social inclusion, if somebody wanted to contact me, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all for the answers that you've given. I know some of them are not, we just don't have, a solid answer to give, but it's great discussion and great questions have been posed. So thank you to everyone. And we will, as I said, we will compile a list of questions that have not been answered today. If you have any questions, please give them to one of the AMSA staff and we'll put those together and send them to our presenters. And we'd really like to thank the presenters this morning, Dylan Mazer, Mariana Martinez Vieira, Dr. Sharon Cohen, and Mark Larrabee. And we do have little thank you gifts for each one of you, so I'll just bring those over to you. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mariana.
Thank you. Sharon, thank you. Mark, thank you.
We really appreciate your time and your knowledge. I know that I've certainly learned a lot today and have a lot to take away with me. Thank you. Thank you also to everyone who's joined us today to learn and to pose these questions. It really has been a dynamic discussion. Remember that the presentation will be available for you and for your colleagues to view online. And before we wrap up, I once again want to acknowledge Citizenship and Immigration Canada. They have provided the funding for this event. Also, thank you to the great work by the audiovisual team at XE Live Broadcast for bringing the event to our online audiences. And finally, thank you to AMSA for the team for all of the work that they've done to make this event happen today. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes beforehand to bring this all together, so thank you. And please remember to complete the evaluation on today's E-Symposium. For those of you in the room, you'll find a salmon-colored evaluation form in your packet. It is double-sided, so please, if you can take just a moment or two to complete both sides, we really appreciate that. You can leave it with any of the AMSA staff, and that really helps to plan future events, so your input is really valued. And for those of you online, please complete the online evaluation form by Tuesday, October the 6th at 5 p.m. And so once again, thank you to everyone and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Now I realize. Disorienting.